Hi students, today I'm going to show you how to make your animal-shaped bread. I've gathered my ingredients here and already weighed and measured them out. The recipe calls for 2.5 to 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I've measured it out, but I've separated it into 2 separate bowls. In my one bowl, I've put 1.5 cups of flour because that's what you're going to start with in step number 1. Later on in step number 2 is when you are going to possibly knead in the remaining flour. So that you don't spend the rest of the video wondering what my shirt says, it says, "I bake because punching people is frowned upon. Thanks to my parents for getting this for me for Christmas." This recipe calls for 1 package of quick active dry yeast. Now normally you see yeast listed as either active dry or quick instant yeast. In this case you can use either one. If you have instant yeast, you can follow the instructions on the recipe provided. If you have active dry yeast, I would like to recommend an alternate way for mixing. If you're using active dry yeast, you need to activate it first before just throwing it in with the flour. So I would like you to mix it up with a little bit of your water and the sugar and set it aside for 5 minutes before continuing to add it to the rest of your ingredients. If you do not have a package of yeast, but you have a larger bag like this, each package of yeast is equal to 2¼ teaspoons, so you can just measure that out. The remaining ingredients call for a tablespoon of sugar, a teaspoon of salt, a ½ cup of water, a 1/3 cup of milk, a tablespoon of butter, and 1 egg. It also calls for 2 raisins that you can use for eyes. If you don't have raisins at home, you can use chocolate chips. In your large bowl with your 1½ cups of flour, you're going to add in your yeast, your sugar, and the salt. In step 2, it says to use a quart-sized saucepan to heat up your water, your milk, and your butter. There's no reason why you can't do that in the microwave with a microwave-safe container. You'll note that it says to heat it up to 125 degrees to 130 degrees. Please remember, yeast dies at 138 degrees, so it's better to err on the side of warm than boiling hot. If you have a thermometer at home, I highly recommend that you use that. I'm going to pour my water in with my milk, which is a larger measuring container, and I'm going to add in my butter. Then I'm going to throw it in the microwave. I put it in the microwave for about a minute, and when I tested the temperature and it came out, it is way too hot. So definitely try starting at 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and continuing. Now I'm just going to set this aside until it cools to 130 degrees or lower. I just checked the temperature of my milk mixture, and it's now at 130 degrees. When I stuck my finger in, it feels warm, but it's definitely not hot. At this point, if you would like to add food coloring into the milk mixture, you definitely can if you wanted to end up with a green or a blue or a pink bread, depending on what animal you're making. Now it's time to stir this mixture into our flour and yeast mixture. Go ahead and add your egg in. I highly recommend that you crack it into another container before adding it in. You can also use a fork to lightly scramble it. I'm going to pour my egg in and continue to mix it, and then add flour as needed to make it easier to handle when I begin to knead it. Okay, I did switch over to using my hands. Simply it was easier to mix it that way. And it is now floured enough so that way I can put it on my counter and begin to knead it for 5 minutes. You're not looking to add tons of flour here. Continue to knead, adding more flour as necessary when it gets too sticky to work with. I've kneaded it for 5 minutes, and you can see that it has become a nice smooth ball of dough. I'm going to set it aside on my counter, cover it up with some plastic wrap, and let it rest for 10 minutes. I also want to note I did not use all of the flour in the recipe. I have at least probably a ½ cup here, if not a little bit more. so make sure you don't add it all right away. My dough has been resting for 10 minutes, and now it's time to start shaping it into the animal that I would like. I have chosen to do a cat. The dough feels really nice and soft now. So the easiest thing to do is to begin building it onto the sheet tray that you're going to cook it on. If you have parchment paper, you can use that. If not, grease it with either a pan spray or just a little bit of oil, whatever you have at home. For my cat, I know I'm going to need a head, a body, 2 feet, a tail, and a little bit of dough to use for a nose and some whiskers. Okay, so I've portioned it into the sizes that I think I'll need. I have the largest one for the body. The next size down is for the head. I have 2 equal size pieces for my paws. This is going to be for my tail, and then this is going to be some additional little details to put on there. If you find that you're having difficulty shaping your pieces, just shape it a little bit of the way, set it aside, and then come back to it when the gluten is rested a little bit more. Okay, I've assembled my cat onto my sheet tray. I decided to use mini chocolate chips for the eyes, and I just kind of pressed them in. This recipe does not call for an egg wash or anything like that, but I really want my cat to look nice and shiny and golden brown. So I'm going to use an egg yolk mixed with a little bit of milk or half and half or water, whatever you have, and I'm going to brush that onto my cat. And then I'm going to cover it and set it aside for 20 minutes to rise. My cat has been proofing for 20 minutes. He's puffed up a little, and now he's ready to go into a 400-degree oven for approximately 20 to 25 minutes.